Welcome back to Know Thy User, brought to you by RivalMind, a results-driven digital marketing agency. We took a bit of a break, but now we're back with season 2. If you're listening on audio only, I'd encourage you to check out the video version on YouTube so you can see our awesome new set. I'm Harley. I'm the lead search marketing strategist at RivalMind, and I'll be one of 3 awesome hosts this season. Today, I'm stoked to introduce a very exciting guest, Stephanie Gandsey, marketing director at DHJJ, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors. Thanks so much for joining us, Stephanie. We're glad to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me today, Harley.
So let's jump right in. What I want to do is, who are you? Who is DHJJ? What's your role at the company? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure. So I'm the marketing director at DHJJ. We're a full service CPA firm, business advisory and financial advisory. I have been there 7.5 years. And when I first came in, the person who was retiring from the position I was in was more on the in-person business development side. So when I came in, I brought the digital background.
Yeah.
The firm was looking for a larger reach than just the local area. They're in Naperville and St. Charles, and they wanted to expand to the whole northern Illinois and beyond region. So I was able to bring my digital marketing background, content marketing to the firm and integrate that in with all of the strategic plans that we had.
Awesome. So tell me about when we're talking about bringing in digital background, really approaching new ground for DHJJ at the time. What are some of the things, did you find naturally that the C-suite and the bigwigs at DHJJ, were they really hungry to get to know the digital industry and the market for what DHJJ's potential would be? Or are you finding yourself constantly having to find ways to pull them back into what you want to pursue from a digital agency or a digital marketing perspective for the company?
Sure. So when I first came to the firm, I don't think anyone really knew what to expect from me. Content marketing was new to them. Even though that has been big in the marketing industry for years, it was new to a CPA firm, and they didn't really know what to expect. And historically, CPA firms, people operate in silos. Well, what I brought to the table, and I told them day one when I came in, that everyone was going to think a little bit like a marketer because that was what was going to make us succeed. So when I talked about content marketing, I told them how we would all be creating this content. It's not just me creating it and talking about what they do, but I really wanted to pull that thought, that knowledge out of them, get it into words, get it into video, and then get it into the places where we can disseminate it, our website, our social, newsletters, and into other organizations that we belong to. So I told them that day one. I had a few people kind of wondering what that looked like, and it did take, it took some time to acclimate everyone to that style. My suggestion, find the people that like to share their knowledge, work with them first, so you have the baseline to show everybody else what could be done. And as we grew into that, I would say that the day I noticed that it was successful was the day that people started coming to me with content ideas or handing me pieces of content. I didn't have to drag it out of them. They were coming to me because they saw the value in it. They liked when they received accolades from people or their clients. So it was creating a new culture, a new way of thinking on how we were going to market.
And I think that's super, super important, especially even from like the vendor side or a service provider side. When we're talking to you about how are we going to get the general public interested in your content, we can do a really great job of researching and writing as much as we can, but really it takes, an expert in the field to talk about the things that matter to their clients and then how it applies and all of that. We could be a great educational source, but I think the mission of getting an accountant to think outside of, numbers and spreadsheets and how is what they're actually doing affecting their client? How is what they're doing helping their client? How is what they're doing helping the company? It's a much more like cohesive strategy than, one accountant that's been doing it for 50 years and he's got his people that come to him regularly, and then you just try to, as a firm amass as many of those guys as you can, and now you have your book of business. But putting the firm first and the name of the firm, and as a collaborative effort, driving the creative minds and kind of creating creative minds out of people who may or may not be as creative to drive the marketing, I think is super, super cool. So tell me about some of the, as a larger firm, tell me about some of the struggles that you've had bringing this plan to action, because, naturally an accountant may not be excited to write a blog. And the director of operations or the COO might not be super pleased that now his accountants and his number crunchers are writing articles and detracting from work. So how has that expectation been managed?
And that's a great point. For people who aren't aware of how CPA firms work, every minute is tracked, right? So you think about a billable hour.
Right.
So it's super important for a CPA to make sure that their billable hours are where they need to be, because we're a firm and we're doing this to help clients, and it's a business. But so one of the struggles was to communicate what amount of time was needed, for the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
So I had to really be clear on, how long it's going to take to create this piece of content, this article, or do this video, and be mindful of that. So I would do the pre-work, like really setting up like what the message is going to be. And that's one thing I really want to throw out there in this conversation, is that as the marketing person at a professional services firm, when you're getting this knowledge out of people, you're really being the master communicator. Everyone there is so super intelligent, but it really takes that other person to be able to communicate the correct message when you're trying to find new clients or educate your current clients.
Right.
So those were some of the struggles in the beginning. However, my firm, very open to it. They understood that this was the way that we needed to go. So there was time earmarked, for this.
Sure.
And especially with the people who were interested in providing this content, they made sure that they had that time built in. And then luckily, it was nice to see right away when you start sending this content in newsletters and you have current clients reaching back out or asking questions or asking for other services. That was a pretty easy win in the beginning, and it made it easier to show how this would transfer when we were trying to find brand new clients.
Yeah, the engagement piece from current clients is huge. I think even that's something that RivalMind, as we've grown, has struggled with, as we've come up with new services and new offerings, and we've enhanced services and offerings. And some of our clients are like, hey, do you guys do Google ads? And we're like, oh, I can't believe you didn't know that. We do Google ads really well. And so having a channel to use the knowledge inside your company to not only go out and prospect for new business, but also educate current clients on the expertise that you have and how you can help them even further than what they already are being helped is super, super creative. So from the C-suite, larger businesses, RivalMind works with companies that are small, where we're working directly with the owner. We also work with companies like yours, where it's the marketing director and then the decision makers, really. And then we also have companies where, they have a marketing team and we're just one piece, and, big organization. So from your perspective, what are the things that the C-suite group are looking for out of you to continue pushing for new ideas and things? What are they more focused on, the bottom line of what your efforts are actually producing, or are they focused on you simply leading them into new places and they just trust that you are going to bring the business and then it's just your job to perform it? Tell me a little bit about expectation setting with your C-suite and how you accomplish that.
I always say that it's a three-prong approach with me. So one, with marketing, I am tasked with bringing new clients into that funnel so we could take a look at them. I also say that it is educating current clients, whether it's just that client experience so they understand what's happening, that they want to stay with us. But the third piece that I think is super important with marketing and creating content and everything that we're doing is internal communication and educating our entire, we have 100 people at DHJJ, and creating this content in this area. Like when we're talking about state and local tax, we have a group that does that. But we need all of our CPAs to have a little bit of understanding on that, to have a conversation.
For sure.
So when we're creating this, it is helping us educate the entire firm. So we even offer, it's called CPE, but it's like professional credits that the CPAs need to keep up with.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so we are able to help create some of the content for that with them, or show them this is what has been a hot topic based on what we're seeing, with our ads, with our people visiting our website.
Yeah.
And it helps drive the topics that everyone on staff needs to be understanding. So we're really, not just having 2 people understand it, but everyone in our entire firm.
Yeah.
And that's what's been great with, this is where I think it's also important to, partner with someone like RivalMind. Like, so I'm the marketing director. I have a marketing manager, and then I have a person that helps kind of like with data and administrative type functions. And, with 100 people, we can get all of our strategies. We have goals. But it's wonderful to be able to work with a company like RivalMind, because we're trying to hit every piece. We're trying to do search ads. We're trying to make sure our website's up to par. So every which way with marketing, we're trying to make sure. And it's nice to have that outside perspective. Sometimes, when you're so deep into something, you might not notice. And it's nice to work with you guys as well, because I feel like it helps benchmark us against what other people are doing. It keeps us current. And that's super important in a field like ours, is to really stay up on, what's new, what's next, what can it be in 5 years. So
yeah, I love that. It's really fun to, as we onboard new clients, we do have clients that do what you do all around the country. And so it's fun to see what they're doing, how they approach marketing, how you guys are pivoting and moving in the space constantly, and be able to provide that kind of outside opinion. And also, being able to partner with you allows us to just simply give you the numbers of what's going on. We'll present, we present our ideas on how we think we can grow and push. And then you'll say, no, I don't think that's going to fly. Or, yeah, I think this is a really good idea. Here's how we could implement it further, even in your kind of internal learning. Yeah, if we use RivalMind to create this article, we can bolster it in this way. And then we can turn it around and have, our CPAs learning from this article, or reading this article, or interested in this article. And I think that's just a lot of fun.
Yes. And another thing I want to mention with the C-suite, yes, of course they care about what business is coming in, right? They're going to look on what's this return on the investment they're putting into it. And what's nice with digital marketing, whether it's paid search or, just organic, putting articles out there, our ROI is fantastic for when we get one client that's like a good client. The ROI is amazing. In a month, it takes getting one really good client to meet what the investment was put in, and that goes a long way with the C-suite as well. When they see this really good client that comes in, and it's kind of bridging the gap. It's not even just marketing anymore. It's almost like we brought it all the way through the funnel.
Right.
By the time that we find something online, or someone comes to us online, and I'll field that phone call, give them an overview, and they get to the proposal process. A lot of times, by that time, we see them become a client. So, it really pulls it through the funnel, which is not back in 30 years ago with CPA firms, you had a lot of hardcore business developers, breakfast, lunch, dinner, golf, right? Yep. That's what they were doing. Not to say that we don't do those things.
I think RivalMind needs to institute a little bit more golf, personally.
Right. Not that we don't do those things. They're not fun, but we realize that marketing is a toolbox, and I have to be able to pull out the tool that I need for the day. Yeah,
I love that analogy. I use it with our search marketing team all the time. There are 1,000 ways to grow a business, and we have 100 of them in our belt. I call it the bat belt. You're an SEO strategist. I want you to understand all of the things, all of the tools in your belt, and then you take that and you apply it to your clients in whatever way you feel is going to help them grow the most. And so it's fun to see that, you think of it the same way. You have all of these tactics that you could use. Now, which one is the one that you're going to put the throttle on? So with that, all of these different tactics, how do you, if it's something that you aren't currently doing or something that is new for the firm to investigate as far as like something that they're going to have to pay for from a marketing perspective, how do you go about getting the buy-in from the people who are going to have to write the checks for those services or products or investments in marketing? What are some of the things that they're looking for from you to know that they're going to make that return on their investment?
Sure. So I'm extra fortunate because I am on the leadership team for my firm. So I get to have a lot of candid conversations with the people that are leading our different practice group areas.
Sure.
So we have periodic conversations, kind of seeing like what's coming down with tax law strategies and planning, what might be new with audits and things. So we keep up on that. And that's how we start setting up like, okay, what are we going to focus on for this quarter or this year? Where do we see that we can grow the business? So
Right.
I could pull a lot of reports prior to those conversations,
Sure.
to show like what they've been working on and say, I think we have an opportunity here. How do we feel about this? So I get to have a lot of those conversations, and then that's what drives where we're going to spend. So then I'll put a budget together, and we try to set some different goals, and it's not always number goal of like we want to make X amount of dollars.
Sure,
Might
sure.
be like, hey, we want to bring on so many new clients in this. When we first started our state and local tax, our SALT group, we didn't really know what to expect. So we're like, let's start out with bringing 6 to 10 new clients in with this service. Let's start with that. And we did that. Then we had a good benchmark baseline to show what that
What kind of
revenue
effort it took.
effort, what the revenue was, so then we can take a look at what we were going to set goals for next year. And I'm proud to say that that's our biggest growth area in our firm now. So that is something we're going to continue focusing on. We do a lot of the digital ads, as you know. You guys help us with that and content with it, and people are happy to make videos to talk about it and send it to our clients. So, we've seen a lot of good growth in that area. But
and it's fun it's cool from an analytics perspective on our side. I know Andrew, the strategist on your account, loves to see, what articles are performing, what is driving traffic to the site each month. And it's interesting how with the seasons and with the year, how the year changes, and what point in the calendar are we at, what articles are performing. Now that we've built a relatively healthy library of helpful content on your website, we'll see some content, it'll surface towards the beginning of the year. And then as we hit the summertime, it starts to fade off because, we're looking at search trends and what people are looking for at what times of the year. And then we'll start to see other articles take over that are driving the traffic. And that's really cool. And it's fun for us to see the attribution of, okay, we posted this article. It took 6 months for it to really get any feet. But then now that it's got feet and people are seeing it, people have entered the website through this. They've gone and looked at service pages, and then they've, gone as far as to fill out a request for, a consultation or a quote or getting in touch or just asking general questions. And I think like from a marketer's perspective, that's the dream, is having the attribution to be able to see, okay, I wrote this piece, people came to the site, found what they needed, and then became a client at the very end of it. And I think having that attribution is also a great tool for you to be able to show, in your case, if you have those big clients that you get once or twice a year maybe, and having that attribution for those clients is validating for your strategy, and then you communicating it to us is validating for our strategy and knowing that we're in the right vein. So tell me a little bit about DHJJ's kind of seasonality and how you utilize your different tool belt throughout the year. I know, one of the things that we have focused on in the past is towards the end of the year and into tax time, we'll go at running advertisements online to try and capture the search volume because, everyone in America has to do their taxes and all the businesses have to get their tax prep done in time. And then, in the spring, I don't know if you guys follow this trend, but in the spring there are tons of conventions and meetups and group conversations. And so tell me a little bit about your toolbox and how you utilize it.
Yeah, so obviously a CPA firm is very deadline driven.
Yep.
And, most people, you think about the March 15th for businesses, April 15th for individuals.
Yeah.
But then we also have the fall deadlines for extensions. And one thing that when we think about seasonality from a marketing perspective is, after those deadlines are usually when people figure out they're either upset with their current firm or maybe they're outgrowing the firm they're at. That's an opportunity for our firm, for our mid-size firm, to kind of come in there and say, oh, if you're having trouble with this, or if, this is something that's on your mind and you've just outgrown the firm you're at, come take a look at us. So there's things like that we think about, when we're going to run ads. Obviously, I'm always mindful of the spend. As I think anyone knows, you can go way overboard on your spend. So you have to be smart with your dollars and really figure out where you can compete on it. So, just saying, oh, get taxes done. Well, obviously at that point in time, you'd have people clicking. And I've made the mistakes, before trying to really tweak what wording I'm using, how I'm communicating this, because, with a firm that's working as a team, an individual is not a good fit.
Right.
It's not a good fit for either of us. So, we really have to think about how we are wording everything and what we're putting out there, really what's that persona? What is that person, that business that needs to come to us?
It's a joke, but knowing that user, you have to know who it is you're looking for, not only to give yourself the best chance at success for that client, but also you have to know what they're looking for and how to make sure that they aren't brought in to your funnel if they're not going to be served by you, and you're saving them time and effort and frustration, and you're saving yourself marketing dollars by understanding, who it is you're going after, what things they're going to be looking for, not when we're talking about accounting, it bridges the business to business and business to consumer, but then we get into the subset of business accounting and what things are important to businesses specifically. And, if you're going after a specific target of market, like you are, a revenue threshold, what things related to accounting are important to businesses of this size at this time of year. And so you can really start to zero in on problems and issues that these businesses are having, and then create content and run advertising around what they're truly looking for at the time they're looking. And that's just kind of timely advertising, timely marketing. That's great. So how important would you say, like, holistic marketing? We've talked a lot about digital marketing, but I know for a fact that DHJJ does non-digital too.
Sure.
How important would you say the balance of traditional to digital is to DHJJ, and where do you see the most of your business coming from? Is it the boots on the ground trade shows and conferences that you're doing, or are you also seeing equal and or greater opportunity through digital marketing? How does that marketing mix affect what you're doing?
So with a CPA firm and financial advisory firm, they still are very much referral based, right? It's a relationship business.
Absolutely.
We need someone to trust us, especially we're dealing with money, right? So we need that trust to happen, and we need it to happen kind of quickly to bring a client in. However, where I would say the biggest change has been is, even though you get referrals from bankers, from attorneys, from other outside people like that, what is the first thing someone does? They go online to check it out. So I always tell people that the digital marketing is super important now because it's a second level of referral. Right. No one takes anything for face value anymore. They're going to go look it up, or even just that's how they're going to go get the contact information. Right. They know that information is available. So that being said, with our budget, I focus a lot on digital. We still do some traditional things, for those relationships, but we don't have billboards, and we're not focused on a print ad, unless it just came into a package, because that's not helping us build the relationship. Yeah. Now when someone calls in, we email them right away with a link to the bio of the person that's going to be working with them. So they have a visual of that person.
Yeah.
They could read about their background, because we have people that specialize in different areas. So they can say, oh, you know, they understand my business. That's what they work in. So the digital piece is super important to bringing in new clients and even keeping the current clients as well. Part of my role, it's a stretch beyond marketing, but it's client experience too. It's how our clients can reach out to us and work with us, and you know, things that we have in place to make it easy and secure for them to give us documents. So yes, it's a referral-based industry. We're always going to want to have relationships with bankers and attorneys, but it's even made that easier because now we can have digital relationships with them as well. We get banks that will refer to us and they haven't met us in person. It's because they looked at our site or they see something online. We have the brand recognition and they see that we could possibly help their clients. So they throw our name into the mix. Right. You know, so that's something we work on too. And, you know, in this age, I don't see how a business couldn't focus on their digital footprint and what they look like, because that's part of their reputation. Yeah. And I think you know, the traditional non-digital methods are also a lot harder to track too. It's a lot harder to get the attribution. You know, we can talk about billboards, and sure, 84% of people look at a billboard as they're driving down the freeway, but how do you know how many people are seeing that? And then how long does it take for them to make the decision to contact you as a result of that billboard? Are they doing it while they're in the car immediately? And there's no way to really zero in on that attribution. And so you almost, from a marketing perspective, you almost have to create just this like marketing slush fund that's we know billboards are effective. There's no way to gauge the attribution, so we're going to put this amount on it, and we're just going to consider that lost funds. And if it happens to bring business, great. And from the attribution side, you know, I was talking about articles and being able to see people coming in and reading those articles and spending time on the page. When we talk about building that trust, a lot of people, I can't tell you how many times I sit in introduction calls with businesses who want to build a website or want to do search engine optimization or Google Ads or what have you. They're kind of just like, I just want people to come to my website and know that we're legit and give me a call. Well, I feel like that adage is kind of going away because everyone has a website. Everyone has their phone number on the website. Everyone's quote unquote legit because they have a website. I mean, my 18-year-old sister has a blogging website that she made herself. So from a business perspective, it's about building your brand, solidifying confidence in your brand from the outside world, and then education, like the education piece. And I think you alluded to that, you know, when your prospects come to you, they've already received so much education because they've had, maybe it's a touch point through an ad, then they had a touch point through a blog, maybe they signed up for a newsletter and they've also had that, and they're not a client. Yeah. And that, all of that data is super important. And there's certain data that I use that, you know, I don't need to share with all of the C-suite. Right. You know, sometimes I have to determine like what is going to be meaningful for them versus what's meaningful for me. But that data to see where people are going on our site, maybe there's been times where we thought something would be a hot topic and, you know, we just weren't getting the traffic even from the newsletters, you know, sending it out to our clients. Right. You know, so it's like, oh, you know, maybe this isn't exactly what they're worried about now. So it warrants a conversation with our team to figure out, you know, what else is maybe top of mind. You know, we have to watch the news cycles because that's what starts driving people to think about how we could help them. Yep. One of the most validating times that I had is we created a white paper for our website, and we pushed ads with that what was that, a few years ago when there was a lot changing, from the administration.
Yep.
There was a lot changing for businesses, particularly manufacturers, which we deal a lot with. So we wrote a white paper, and we had like 6 things that a manufacturing company should look at. And we had that on there. And I think the most validating time was when we had someone click on it, download it, reach out to us. We went to meet them for lunch, and they brought a printout of it. So we were able to see how many people were clicking on this, and that was the one time that when I was there, it just felt so good to see like this content meant something to them. They are now one of our biggest clients.
Yeah. That's so good. And I think it also, that also speaks into the value of getting your experts on board. Because if a non-accounting marketing firm like RivalMind, we have clients in every space, but if not an expert in the space had written that article, would it have been as appealing, as useful, as helpful, as shareable, as likable for your prospect? And would it have had the same effect if it wasn't procured and thought up by your experts?
Right. And it's super important to have the experts do the writing because they go deeper. However, I think working with a company like RivalMind to finesse everything definitely helps. That's where it's like, okay, well, if you use this word, you can compete in this space a little better. Right. Or if we do this ad, this is going to get more reach in the area that you want it to be. Yep. So it really is everyone working together in that respect. So I really see the value in not only working with your team, but working with an outside company as well with that.
Yeah, awesome. So, really, we're kind of wrapping up on time. Stephanie, I'm so glad that you came in. We were able to cover a ton. I think marketers everywhere, are going to gain something from this discussion and how they can better communicate with their vendors about what they need to help them be successful. I think they're going to be able to communicate better with their C-suite on what things they need to show them to get the buy-in, to get the validation. And then, I think this discussion is also helpful for just what avenues can you explore as a marketer, digital, non-digital, how to find that right mix. So I'm super glad we had you on the show. Thanks so much for your time. So really, thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Harley Helmer. Join us next week on Know Thy User for another marketing conversation.